avec quelqu'un qui a dit que je peux pas jouer aux poupées, et après j'ai pleuré.
Welcome to Papatriarcha, the podcast that reflects on parenthood in the 21st century by trying to free it from the patriarchal model. I'm delighted to welcome you for a new episode of Papatriarcha with a person whose work I love and who inspires me daily in my parenthood, Dr. Payne Bryson. Dr. Payne Bryson is the author of Bottom Line for Baby and co-author with Dan Siegel of 2 New York Times bestsellers, The Whole Brain Child and No Drama Discipline, each of which has been translated into 50 languages, as well as The Yes Brain and The Power of Showing Up. She is the founder and executive director of the Center for Connection, a multidisciplinary clinical practice in Southern California. Dr. Bryson keynotes conferences and conducts workshops for parents, educators, and clinicians all over the world, and she frequently consults with schools, businesses, and other organizations. Tina is graduated of Baylor University with a PhD from USC. The most important part of her bio, she says, is that she's a mom for her 3 boys. You can learn more about Dr. Bryson at tinabryson.com, and I invite you to follow her on social media like Instagram. Before we start our episode, I would also like to introduce you to Dr. Daniel Siegel, who is quoted in the episode so that you can get to know a little Dr. Bryson's co-author. Dr. Daniel Siegel is a world expert on the childhood brain. A graduate of Harvard, he teaches psychiatry at the University of California School of Medicine in addition to being co-director of research on mindfulness. Finally, I would like to send a special thanks to Cecilia Lemaire, parenting coach, without whom this episode would not be in your ears. Our discussion today will revolve about the book No Drama Discipline. What exactly do we mean by discipline? How can we support our children while respecting their needs and ours? How can we actually implement the solutions proposed in this book? So many questions where we will try to answer as best as we can. So let's go for the first question. Dr. Bryson, can you tell us about your background and what led you to write the book No Drama Discipline? I wish you a good listening.
I had written the book, The Whole Brain Child, with my co-author, Dan Siegel. I had just finished a doctoral degree studying child rearing theory and science. And when I would go and speak about The Whole Brain Child, and when I was out talking to parents and educators, all of the questions I was getting were about discipline and about what do we do when kids, like a lot of parents say, I know what not to do, but I don't know what to do. And so I started teaching some classes, just local classes about what the brain science and the child rearing science was leading to in terms of how we think about behavior and how we think about discipline. And what I came to realize is that most of what the world thinks about discipline is really outdated when we really understand how the brain and the nervous system works and how children learn. And so I felt a passion to really change how the world thinks about children's behavior and thinks about how we respond to it in really effective ways. For me, of course, it had to be the next book. And it's the one that I end up probably talking about the most because everybody deals with challenging behavior.
That's really something we know now in France because, in France there is a new law from 2019 that not allow violence toward children. The most part of the parents say, okay, but how can I punish children without violence, That's very interesting because I hear the same thing in your words that parents want to do the good way, but they don't know how to do.
That's right. What I really want to make a huge point about is that we really want to start with what is our goal? Why even think about punishment? Why even think about discipline? And if our goal is, and this is what my goal is, I have 3 children. My children are older now, 23, 20, and 17. And I have parented this way that I'm going to be talking about. My goal for them was that they become self-disciplined so that they do the right thing and handle themselves well without me having to say or do anything. That was my goal, was to become a self-disciplined person who treats people well, who makes good decisions, all of those things. And the way we get them there is actually not through punishment. it's much more effective. And when we think about how the brain learns, to reconsider the way we get them there, the whole point and purpose of discipline is to teach, because the way children learn everything is through learning. If that's the only thing people walk away from this episode, is to say that discipline is about teaching, it's not about punishment. Punishment in many, many ways is counterproductive for our goal of self-discipline. Punishment usually makes kids get better at hiding their behavior. It doesn't usually change their behavior. So that will be really fun for us to get into elevating our discipline and really rethinking all that we've been taught through this new lens.
For those unfamiliar with the concept, how would you define no drama discipline in a few words?
Yeah. So no drama discipline is much more about our drama. I was worried that the title would communicate, like, make kids stop crying, or that it would communicate kind of being dismissive. I actually we have a colleague that we trust who told us, I really hope you don't use the word discipline in the title of your book about discipline. And we said, why? And she said, because when people think about discipline, they usually think about punishment. But discipline, as I was saying, comes from the word disciplina, which is like discipling, mentoring, teaching. And so really the idea of no drama discipline is, if we are teaching our children, then when we discipline or teach each time, it makes it more likely our child will handle it better the next time and not repeat those same behaviors. So in many ways, it becomes easier for us. It's less drama for us and less drama for them, because if our discipline is effective, we're not going to see those same behaviors happening over and over and over, and it gets easier for everybody, because what we're doing is we're teaching them and changing how their brain is wired so that they handle themselves well. And I think a lot of times in discipline moments, the kid is really reactive, angry. The parent is really reactive, angry, and it brings a lot of drama. But when we are in really reactive states, we actually can't learn. So discipline can't even happen in that moment. Punishment can happen in that moment, but that's not our goal. Our goal is to teach, to make it more likely the child does the right thing. Maybe not the very next time, but over time as their brain continues to develop. When we don't get really reactive as parents, we're much more effective teachers, and it's much more likely our children will learn. So we don't want to bring a lot of drama or a lot of reactivity to those moments. They actually reinforce the behavior and they get in the way of learning. So their drama is counterproductive. It's problematic when we're talking about teaching.
Okay, you summarize the no drama discipline with the word redirect. Can you tell us what does it mean, please?
Yeah, so in the book, in our first book, The Whole Brain Child, the first strategy is connect and redirect. And it's based on the idea that when our child is having a lot of emotions, maybe they're having a tantrum, or they're really angry, or they're really frustrated or mad that they're not getting something. They have a lot of emotion. And when we connect with them through when we're calm and we really pull them close to us and really focus on the relationship and being there for them in this hard moment, it allows them to learn and be more open. So let me say it this way. The brain is either reactive and not ready to learn, or the brain is receptive and ready to learn. And so what Connect does is it allows them to move from a reactive state into a receptive state so that their brain is ready to learn. So then once we connect, then we can redirect their behavior by teaching them other options. So let me give a really specific example. When my boys were little, there was one moment, my boys were probably 8 and 5 years old. And my 5-year-old got really, really mad at his brother and hit his brother really hard, left a handprint on his back. So the first thing I did was I comforted my 8-year-old. Are you okay? That looks like it really hurts. Do you want me to put a little cool cloth on it? And I hugged him and I comforted him. And then he said, "Oh, I'm fine, I'm fine." And so he left. And then it was really the discipline moment, right? So now I have this 5-year-old who just broke a rule. He hit his brother. That's not okay in my house. And so now I have to address the behavior. Now, what could I do? I could yell at him and say, "Why did you hit your brother? You know that's not okay." And I could yell. Does that do anything to teach him the next time? So the first question I really want to think about is like, what is it that got in the way of my kid behaving well? Well, part of it is he's 5. When he's 7 or 8, he's not going to probably hit. So part of it's just his development and how it's still growing and unfolding. But then also, if I just yell at him, that's not going to teach him to handle his anger better. In fact, it's giving him an example of yelling and not handling his anger well, right? Or I could force him to make an apology. Go tell your brother you're sorry right now. But when you're angry, and he was, when I came around the corner and he was standing there, he was like angry, angry, angry. I could see it. His little heart was beating so fast and his muscles were tense and his face was red. If I, in that moment, say, go tell your brother you're sorry, he doesn't feel sorry in that moment. He doesn't feel any empathy in that moment because the part of his brain that allows him to calm himself down and pause before action and make kind choices and feel empathy is his prefrontal cortex. And when we have really intense emotions, it's like we flip our lid and we don't have the ability to access that part of our brain. So I'm asking him to do something he doesn't feel. Okay, so I am going to make him apologize, but not in that moment. Or I could punish him. I could say, go to your room and you stay in your room. And now I'm going to take away your friends can't come over today for playing. No play today. You stay in your room. Now, if I do that, he is going to go to his room. And I promise you, he is not going to sit in his room and say, you know what? I really should have handled that better. That's not going to happen. He's 5. He's angry. So what he's going to do is think about, and by the way, he wasn't the only perpetrator. His brother had done something really mean to him and kept doing it. And that's why he finally lost it, right? Now, I didn't see that part. But if I punish him and send him away, he's sitting in his room saying, Luke did this to me and it's his fault. And she loves him more than me. And my mom is so mean. She doesn't even understand how mean he was. And all that he's doing mentally is blaming, blaming, blaming. He's taking zero responsibility for his action. So what do? I do connect and redirect. So the first thing I do in that moment is he's mad. His brain can't learn. I want to communicate to him, even at your worst, I will show up for you. Now, not all behaviors are okay, but all of your feelings are okay. And even though I'm going to say no to that behavior, I'm still going to say yes to you, my child. I'm here for you. So I start with connection. Oh, sweetie, you're so mad. What happened? Come here. Because in the brain, the part of our brain that feels physical pain and emotional pain are the same part. It lights up the same way. If he had hurt himself physically, if he had scraped his knee or hit his head, I would have said, oh, sweetie, what happened? Come here, right? So when they're in physical pain, we tend to be very nurturing and connecting. But if there's emotional pain, especially if it leads to bad behavior, we punish, right? So I say, oh, you're so mad. And then he tells me what his brother did. And then I can empathize with his feelings. I can say, oh, that would have made me so mad too. Yes, of course you got angry. Now, as I do that, as I'm connecting with him, his whole nervous system is starting to calm down. His breathing gets more regular. His muscles aren't as tense. His intensity and the tone of voice starts calming down. And I'm watching this and I'm going, okay, he's almost ready to learn. So I take a big breath and he takes a big breath. And then now is the discipline moment because now I'm ready to teach. So here's where redirect comes in. What I want to do is give him an opportunity. Just like when I lift weights and I do like repetition with a weight, that muscle gets stronger. Reps, right? Doing reps, my muscle gets stronger. I want him to have a rep of learning here about how to handle his emotions. So I say to him, I know you know that hitting your brother is not okay. So what do you think we should do? Because it's okay to get mad, but it's not okay to hit. So next time you feel that angry, what can you do differently? What could you try? So then we talk about that. He's calm. And then I say, you really hurt your brother. And I wait and I let him feel that. Oh, yeah, I shouldn't have done that. Because that feeling of guilt, it's not shame. Shame is bad for children. We don't want to say you're a terrible person, you're the worst. That's not good for children. But this feeling of your conscience saying, "Ooh, I shouldn't have done that," that feeling of guilt is a really healthy feeling because it changes our behavior. It's a very effective teacher. So I let him feel that. And then I say, you know what? What's great about our family is nothing, just like superheroes have all kinds of powers that others can't beat. Our family's superpower is love. So nothing can beat our love. And Luke still loves you. Do you want to go make things right with Luke? And so then he says yes. And so he goes and apologizes. So at the end of that interaction, I didn't punish him. I didn't say, now I'm taking away all these fun things or whatever. What did I do in that moment? I moved his nervous system from reactive into receptive. So his brain just got an experience that I hope to keep repeating of moving from dysregulated into regulated, so that his brain knows how to do that for himself over time. Like, oh, I'm really angry. I can calm down. And the way I help him practice that is by me helping him do that when he's young. Now he can do it for himself, right? And then the other thing I did was we talked about what could you do differently the next time, so that the next time he starts to feel angry, he has another alternative to go to instead of hitting again. So in that interaction, it was all about connecting and then redirecting the behavior for the future and redirecting the relationship with his brother. But it was all about teaching, and it was all done in relationship.
So what I hear when you speak is that connecting is very important in the first part. So you explained us why it's so important. It's because our children can't be able to listen or to feel the way to repair next what happened. But then about redirect. In your books, you use the word redirect and you explain each letter. Can you explain us the method? I don't know if it's a good word. Let's try this. Can you explain us the method?
It depends on the moment. I think, I tend to not go too much to like very specific prescription because every moment is different, right? If your child is sick and they're doing a particular behavior, like I'll tell another story. A time my son was really sick. It was time to go to sleep and he was just a mess. He was just crying and upset and he spilled his tea. And he just lost it. He just sobbed and started just, in that moment, the best redirect is just to get him calm and asleep, right? And because he's sick, right? So every moment is a little bit different. But I think there are different ways to think about the redirect.
I would precise for the audience that the word method, I think it's not good. You use in your books a better word. You speak about strategies, and I think it's better.
Okay, yeah. So, I think one of the things that we want to do is the strategies come from the acronym of redirect. And the first one is to reduce words. And that's the idea that we end up talking too much, lecturing too much. In fact, I'll say that in the No Drama Discipline book, at the end, we have 20 discipline mistakes every parent makes. And on my Instagram account, I actually have in my posts every Monday for a couple of months, I did discipline mistake Mondays, and I walk through each of those and give examples. And I've made every single one of them myself. But one of the mistakes I make a lot is by talking too much, especially if our kids are in dysregulated states. Actually, when we get really reactive, like when your child is having a tantrum and they are really, really lost it, their social engagement circuitry can turn off. And one of the things that happens is their inner ear muscle actually changes. So it's even harder to hear the human voice unless it's danger signal. Like if we're screaming and yelling or something like that, they can hear that. That doesn't mean we should do that. It means we should get them calm so that they can hear our voice. So we end up talking too much and we use way too much logic. So if your child is having, and we talk about this in the Whole Brain Child too, that if your child is really upset we end up using a lot of logic. Like, okay, here's an example of a time my 3-year-old, he wanted me to cut his muffin in half. So I cut his muffin in half. And as soon as I cut it, he didn't want it cut anymore. He wanted it put back together. In that moment, I can, it's not rational, but I'm a logical person. He's not yet. But I'm like, I start explaining, well, once you cut it, you can't put it back together. And too many words. Instead, it would be so much more helpful to redirect by just saying, you're so disappointed. It's in half. You want it to go back together and it can't go back together. That's so hard. I'm right here with you while you're feeling sad, right? To just be present to what's going on. So yeah, we talk way too much. The E of a redirect is embracing emotions. And I think you heard that in my example with my son, JP, where we really, and this is also a strategy in the whole brain child where we call it name it to tame it. And when we really name the emotion, it helps our child really start understanding their own emotions and connecting the feelings they have to being able to express it later. So I remember a time my son was 4 years old and didn't want to get out of the bathtub. He was having fun playing and it was time to get out. Okay, so this is another quick example. I'm going to take a little side trip and then I'll come back to redirect, is that you're going to hear me a lot in here talk about connection and soothing emotions and doing something called co-regulating. So that's when our kids are really upset. We bring our calm and help get them back to calm. But do not mistake what I'm saying here as being permissive. We know from 70 years of research that it's good for kids to have rules and limits and boundaries. And so it actually helps them feel safer. So we want to be high on structure and rules and limits and holding boundaries. But we also want to be high on emotional connection and emotional responsiveness. And that allows the brain to learn. So it's really the combination of structure plus nurture that allow it to be effective. So anyway, I say it's time to get out of the bath. And he says, I'm not getting out. Very oppositional. So I can, again, go to yelling. I can do all of these things, but it's just going to make everything worse. It's going to be not co-regulating, but co-escalating. He's going to get angry. I'm going to get angry. It's going to not go very well. So the first thing I do is I steady myself. And I say to myself in my brain, be the parent you want to be right now. Don't join his storm. Be the calm in the storm. Be stronger, wiser, kinder, because he can't learn anything that's not going to go anywhere if I get reactive too. So I take a nice deep breath. I say to him, you can either get out by yourself or I will help you out. And he does not get out by himself. So I say, I'm pulling you out now. And I lift him and I pull him out of the bathtub. So I'm holding my boundary, but I'm also going to embrace his emotions. I'm going to say, as I'm pulling him out, I say, you're so mad that you have to get out of the bathtub. You really wanted to stay in. You were having a good time playing. And what happens there is I'm saying no to a behavior, but yes to my child's experience. Because what happens is if I criticize or minimize, why are you making such a big deal? You got to already have a long bath. Next time I'm not letting you stay in at all, right? And we throw out a threat that, of course, you're going to give your kid another bath, right? We throw out a crazy threat. But if I start criticizing him, you're being a baby. Why are you crying so much? Then his nervous system, his brain is an association machine. It links things together. So he says, when I share my feelings with my mom, and little kids don't say, I'm feeling really angry right now. They share their feelings through their behavior. But if I'm critical and I criticize him or I minimize his feelings, then he says, when I shared myself with her, that didn't feel very good. Maybe I'm not going to do that. And our children will pull away from us. So instead, we want to embrace the emotions instead of criticizing the emotions. And we want to say, that's really hard when you want something and you're not going to get it. That's really hard. And I'm right here. I always say this, and I'm right here with you while you're feeling it. And if you need to cry, it's okay. I'm right here while you cry. I'm still holding my boundary. And then my kid also learns that I trust that he can handle emotions. And the way that our children become resilient is by walking through difficult experiences and feeling difficult, negative emotions with enough support that they can tolerate them. And they go, yeah, I can handle being frustrated. Yeah, I can handle not getting my way. I know I've spent a long time on those first two. I'll hit the other ones more quickly. Describe, don't preach. So that's the idea of just almost like sports casting a little bit. Like, I'm seeing that you're really having a hard time doing what you're supposed to be doing. You're supposed to be getting your shoes on, and you're not getting your shoes on. And you kind of, really just describe what's happening.
That's neutral.
Yes, exactly. It's time to go, and your shoes aren't on your feet. I know this come up again, but anytime we can be playful and silly with our children, it usually elicits cooperation because it keeps them from getting reactive. It keeps them in a more receptive state. Involve your child in the discipline. That's another strategy. And I think that one's so good because when we ask them to participate in coming up with solutions and figuring out what to do differently and making repair, whatever it is, or even in setting the boundary in the future, it forces them to use their prefrontal cortex. And the way that the prefrontal cortex develops to allow them to pause and make good choices and consider consequences and have empathy and insight and be a good problem solver, all of those really, really rich tools that part of the brain does. Every time we involve them in coming up with thinking through with us, they're exercising that part of the brain. They're getting those repeated experiences, those reps to build that part of the brain. So the way that I do that really practically is, let's say, here's a really common struggle that parents and kids have is around screen time limits, right? Playing video games or being on devices, and kids maybe are allowed a certain amount of time, but they want longer, or they keep pushing, can I stay on more? They want more. It's really important then, one of the ways we can involve them in this is to say, let's say your kid's been spending way too much time with screen time and you're not feeling good about it and you want it to be less. To say to your kid, you know what? We've been spending a lot of time on screens and you've been spending a lot of time on screens. And I feel like it's healthier to have more time that you're playing or you're outside or you're with friends or you're helping me cook dinner or different things like this. So I think we should have less time. I would love to hear your thoughts about it. What is a good amount of time you think per day? And maybe the kid says something ridiculous. I think I should get to be on it all the time without any rules or limits. You can say, there's a wonderful child psychologist named Ross Green, and he has this beautiful dialogue where he basically says, that works for you, but that doesn't work for me. And we need to come up with a solution that works for both of us. So what other ideas do you have, right? Or something like that. Or you can say, let's say bedtimes have been really stressful. You can say, have you noticed, and this is at a time when your child is calm and things are good. Maybe you're on a walk or you're cooking together, or you're snuggling at bedtime and you're calm, your child's calm. And to say, have you noticed that we've been both kind of having a hard time at bedtime? I'm yelling a lot. You're upset. I wish we could have this be calmer and sweeter. So do you have any ideas? That kind of thing. So, and then let's talk about a much older kid, like a teenager that asks if let's say they want to do something and you don't think it's safe. Is to say, well, I want you to think about all of the things that I would be worried about or concerned about, and then come up with some solutions that would make me feel better about that, or how you're going to mitigate those risks, and then present the plan to me, and then I'll consider it. So we really want to, or let's say they've done something wrong. They violated a rule. They did something really dumb, really unsafe, is to say, that's really unsafe. That's really concerning to me. How are you going to prevent this from ever happening again? And be quiet and let them participate in, or a lot of times what they'll come up with, they'll say, well, I won't do this and I won't ever see that friend or whatever. They'll come up with something more intense than you would have come up with. That's really great to have them. You see how much it means to them that they're really listening and they're taking it seriously. Reframing a no into a yes with conditions. We do this all the time. Yes. No, we can't read any more stories tonight because it's time to go to sleep. But the way we do that, instead of saying that, is to say, yes, we can read more stories, but it'll have to be tomorrow morning, right? So we take the no and we turn it into a yes with a little bit of a shift, right? Yes, you can have more ice cream tomorrow for dessert, right? it's not bad to tell our children no. It's important that they hear no and that they internalize it. But if we can save our no's for more urgent things, more safety things, more, those kinds of things, if we can say the yes, their brain receives it as not so much of something to fight against. So we can say, yes, you can go to the park with your friends, but it'll only be an hour and I'll be in the car across the street, or whatever it is. We want to emphasize the positive. That's another strategy. In any case, it again keeps us from being reactive. So we just want to emphasize the positive. Like, you did such a good job trying to tell Luke that you were frustrated with him. And then when he didn't listen, that's when you hit him. But you did a really good job really trying to use your words for a while, and then it just got too hard. So we really want to compliment them and emphasize, it's the idea of catch them being good and let them know that you see the wonderful things about them as well. I really like how you fill in the blank. And next time, I hope you'll do it this way, something like that.
That's something that is very hard in France, because our culture is to empathize the negative, just to see what's wrong. A lot of people, and not especially in parenting, at work, everywhere in France, we always say what's going wrong. It doesn't really take time to say that's going well.
Yeah.
So that's really important for parents to hear that we can take time to say that's good, that's going well.
And I think when we do that, anytime someone says something kind to us or something that they notice that we've done well, it feels great, right? So it gives your child an experience of like, my parent sees me and they know me and they see that I'm trying, or they see these things, but it also can teach them how to be positive with other people and appreciate other people. It really, because children learn by doing things themselves and by watching other people. So they're watching us and they're learning how to do that. I think that's really, it really builds the relationship. It's like every time you are positive with your child, every time you catch them being good, or you notice something that they're doing that's great, or something that you appreciate about them, it's like making deposits in the relationship account with your child. So creatively approach the solution or the situation. That's another one. And this is back to kind of play. I have parents tell me, like, I am too tired and I'm in too much of a hurry to create a puppet show or make up a joke about every situation. I just want them to get their shoes on and get out the door. And I understand that. I have 3 children. I understand that. But sometimes the battle we have with our child in trying to get cooperation is what it takes so much energy out of us. So particularly with younger kids, and I'll give an older kid example too, if we can be creative or playful, playfulness keeps our brain in receptive states. We know that reactive worry, like fight, flight, freeze, those kinds of reactive states are incompatible with play states. That when we are playful, it keeps us from going into these reactive states. Sometimes we have discipline issues when our child is feeling anxiety about something and they're kind of refusing or resistant to doing something. And this is particularly where, if we can be playful, it actually widens their ability to tolerate the feelings of stress or the feelings of anxiety. So, like, I know it's hard to get kids. Let's say your child doesn't want to put their helmet on to get on their bike. Maybe they're refusing to put their helmet on. And you can say, please don't put your helmet on. You really shouldn't wear your helmet because my imaginary friend, Herman, is going to wear your helmet today. And if he comes here and your helmet is on your head, he's going to kind of freak out and I'm going to have to do a weird dance to like calm him down. So please, whatever you do, don't put your helmet on. That's Herman's helmet today, whatever, something like that. They might, if they're a little older, they might roll their eyes, but just still put the helmet on. If they're younger, they might giggle and laugh, whatever. I had an example for older. One time it was time for dinner, and family dinner is really important in my family. And my son just wasn't coming. We were all waiting. So I went to his room. He wasn't checking his phone. He had his earbuds in. He had the music up really loud and he didn't know what time it was or whatever. For me, I want him the next time to pay attention to the time and be, know what's going on. So I went into his room and I'm 5'4" and my son is 6 feet tall. All of my boys are really, really tall. So he's laying on his bed, lazy teenager. And I went and just sat on him. And I said, I'm so glad you didn't come downstairs for dinner, even though it's dinner time and everyone's waiting on you, because I am really tired from walking to your room and I need a rest. And I would just sit on him, and kind of poked him a little bit, and then, and then he's like, oh, sorry, Mom, I wasn't paying attention at the time. And he came right down. Right. So that didn't require a big, you never listen. And it didn't require all of that. The silliness and playfulness still made the point that I wanted to be more thoughtful and considerate of everybody else. So sometimes if we're creative and silly and playful, that can be really helpful. And the final strategy is to teach mind sight tools. And that'll bring me right back to that same story I told earlier, is that when I was having this conversation with my 5-year-old, and I was saying, what can you do next time? It really is, mind sight is really seeing your own mind and the minds of others. It's really a combination of insight and empathy. So it's really thinking about your own thoughts and feelings and thinking about other people's thoughts and feelings. When we use discipline moments as opportunities for them to tune in, like you got really angry, what was happening for you? What did that feel like in your body? What can you do mentally or emotionally the next time to calm yourself down? Like teaching them to put a hand on their chest and a hand on their belly and to have a long exhale, like that's actually called the physiologic sigh. And it's one of the quickest things we know to calm down our whole nervous systems. I use it all the time as a parent before pulling them out of the bathtub or whatever to calm my own system down. So we can teach them strategies to understand their own mind, to calm down their bodies. The way that they learn to self-regulate is by us co-regulating with them. So I guess, the main thing here is that, there are lots of ways to redirect behavior. We have all been taught that if you don't address the behavior right then and there when it's happening, they won't learn. And that's true when you're training a dog. It's true for dogs, but it's not true even for young children. That when they're really reactive or we're really angry and reactive or frustrated, it's the worst time to discipline. And of course, by that, I mean teach. So we really want to ask, the question, what is it I want my child to learn? What is the most effective way to teach that skill? And then I want to come back to that. And then is now the right time? Is my child ready to learn in this moment? And am I ready to teach? And if the answer is no, it's better to either connect and get your child there, or to calm yourself down to get yourself there, or give it some time. You can wait 2 or 3 hours. If you have young children, wait till after a nap and a snack. And then you come back and say, let's tell the story of what happened earlier. I always want to coach like a 6-year-old. For if their parent says, how many times do I have to tell you? I want to coach a 6-year-old to say to their parent, well, according to the science of neuroplasticity, how the brain changes, it's going to require probably 20 to 40 repetitions before I have that down. And so we have to know too that no matter what discipline strategy we use, little kids often repeat the same behaviors. It doesn't mean we're failing as disciplinarians. It means their brain is still developing. And so everything we want our children to do differently, they have to practice doing it. So one of my favorite redirect strategies that wasn't on that list is called the do-over. So if your child, because what I want them to do is to have practice doing it the right way so that it becomes automatic for them, right? Just like when children are very little and we're toilet training them and they have to practice, like, what does it feel like when I have to go to the bathroom? Then how do I get to the bathroom and go to the bathroom? Eventually, they don't think about it. They just go when they have to go, right? So we want these behaviors to become automatic. And the way they do is by practicing over and over. So if my child starts speaking disrespectfully to me, I might say, wait, pause. Your tone of voice is sounding really disrespectful. And I know you can do that in a more respectful way. So rewind, back up out of the room. Let's try that again. Right. And I ask for the do-over too. So let's say in the discipline moment, I have a story I share about, I was playing a game with my kids, a game called Yahtzee with dice. So I was playing Yahtzee and the boys were fighting with each other and it just got worse and worse and worse. And instead of handling it well and saying, you know what, you guys are not getting along right now. Either we need to get along or we need to stop playing the game. And everybody needs to go take some time to calm their bodies down so that we can play. That's how I should have handled it. But they kept fighting. And I was like, guys, come on, knock it off. Like I was kind of irritated. And eventually I got so mad that I yelled at them and I threw the dice across the room, like really reactive, right? And they all just looked at me with big eyes, like, oh man, she's crazy now. And we all are going to have those moments in discipline times where we flip our lids. We're not the parent we want to be in that moment. So what do? Well, the research is very, very hopeful, which says that we can mess up all the time as parents as long as we make the repair. So in that moment, I asked for a do-over. So the do-over was for me this time. And I said, I calmed myself down. I took a big deep breath. And then I said, guys, what I wanted to say was, if you guys had stopped arguing when I told you to, that wouldn't have happened. But you know what? If I apologize that way, remember, they learn by watching what we do. So then they would learn to blame other people for their behavior. And I want them to know that they are responsible for their own behavior no matter what, which is, again, why I liked the solution. When I said if I had just sent my son to his room after hitting, he wouldn't have taken any accountability for his behavior. But in that conversation with me, I said, you hurt Luke. And he had to take accountability and he had to go make things right. Right. So it holds them to that. So that's what I wanted to say. But instead, I wanted to model. So I said, guys, I got really mad and I didn't handle it very well. I should have taken a moment and calmed myself down before I yelled. That wasn't okay. It's not the parent I want to be in this moment. And so will you forgive me? And can I have a do-over? Can we start again? And then, so I think it's really important that we know that we're going to make mistakes, but the way we handle those mistakes is also teaching our kids.
Yes, that's very important. We said that several times in this podcast before. I'm always happy when my guests say that again and again. That's very important for every parent. And you can, for the audience, you just heard that Tina Payne Bryson can yell at her children and and throw the dice too. That doesn't mean that the behavior is okay, but what can we do with that? This is a challenge. What I understand is your reflection about the no drama discipline is really about brain and how does it works. That's why you called it whole brain discipline too?
Yes. Yeah, we also call it whole brain discipline because what we're wanting, the foundation of the book, The Whole Brain Child, which has sold, it's really all over the world. It's in like 60 languages. I love the French cover of No Drama Discipline and Whole Brain Child. They're actually my favorite of all the covers of all the languages. They're so playful and fun. I just love them. But the idea behind The Whole Brain Child is that our brain has lots of different parts that do very different things, right? And we want them all to do what they're supposed to do and work together as a coordinated whole. And so when we talk about whole brain discipline, it's the idea that, let's say your child gets really frustrated with something. They begin to act out with bad behavior. What we would want is that as we discipline and teach and build skills, and as development unfolds and their brain matures, that instead of hitting the brother, one of the things that the prefrontal cortex does is to say, wait, pause, make a different decision, right? Or, shh, don't say that. That's not okay to say. That's unkind, right? That's the kind of stuff our prefrontal cortex does. And our children's prefrontal cortices are developing well into their mid to late 20s, which means that when emotions run big, it's hard for them to access the part of their brain that helps them make. The way I explain it to little kids is I do this hand model that Dan Siegel created, which is, it's basically, I say, make a 5, make a 4, and then hug your thumb with your fingers. And this is sort of like the eyes would be in the front, and the back of your wrist would, or, the top of your wrist would be the back of the where the brainstem is. And I basically say the lower parts of your brain is where you have really big feelings and you just want to do something. But the top part of your brain, including your prefrontal cortex, is the part of your brain that makes calm, kind choices that pauses and that is a problem solver. But sometimes when we have really big feelings or we just want to do something, we flip our lid, and it's hard to pause and make calm, kind choices and to be a problem solver. And then it's cute. I ask kids, like, how do you hug your downstairs brain? How do you calm that part of your brain that really wants to just do and feel? And kids usually know actually what the neuroscience says. They say, I need to move my body. I need a hug. I need to take a deep breath. They typically know what helps calm them down. But whole brain discipline is where we think of every discipline moment as an opportunity to build skills and to teach, to give their brain another experience to help build how each part of the brain works and to build the connections in the brain so that they have access to their whole brain, not just their big emotion part of their brain or not just their reactive behavior part of their brain, but their whole brain, so that they have the ability to pause and make good decisions and be self-disciplined. And the way we get them there is through shifting away from punishment and thinking about teaching. And I'm not saying never to give a consequence. I think it's really helpful to talk about two kinds of consequences. One is called a logical consequence, and that's where the parent imposes a consequence. So let's say your child is playing a video game instead of doing their homework. A logical consequence would be you can't have any screens around you while you're doing homework and no more screen time on school days. Okay, that's a logical consequence that the parent comes up with. And I think that's a great response, right? That makes sense. Now, the way we do it matters, right? If I come in and I see my kids doing that and I start unplugging things and I get really reactive and as parents, we've done crazy things, right? And I'm saying, I'm taking it away for the rest of your life, or whatever. But I could go in and be really mad and angry and yank things out of the room and say, I'm locking these up. Or I can say, you're showing me that it's too tempting to have screens around you while you're focusing on work. So I'm going to hold on to screens until you're mature enough to be able to do that. That's from a teaching lens, not a punishment lens, but it's still taking something away. So that's a logical consequence. Okay. Sometimes logical consequences, we just make them up and they really don't do anything to teach kids. Sometimes we have to hold boundaries though, right? Like my kid needs to study. I don't think he should be on screens. That's for his health and development. So I'm going to set that boundary and enforce it. Okay. The other kind of consequence is called a natural consequence. And that's where we're not doing anything. It's just how the world works. So let's say your child leaves their bicycle outside and someone steals it. The bicycle's gone. You didn't make that happen. It's just a natural consequence. Or your child doesn't do their homework and they get a bad grade. That's not something you're doing. It's just something that happens. Now, I'm a big fan of natural consequences because that's how the world works. And we can still be really empathetic. And guess what? Here's another discipline mistake. Usually when that happens, we're upset too. So let's say your child's bike gets stolen. Usually what we do is we start yelling and lecturing. I told you not to leave that out and this is your fault. And but your kid's really upset at that time. Their bike is gone, right? And we pile on. And if we think about with your spouse or your significant other, if you came home upset about something and they piled on and started lecturing you and making you feel worse, that would be that would be terrible. We typically wouldn't want to do that. But what we can do in those moments is the bike being gone has already taught the lesson. And us piling on makes our kids pull away from us. And the lesson's already being taught, so there's no reason for that. Instead, we can be really empathetic. Oh, sweetie, that's so disappointing. You really loved your bike. Oh, my goodness. Of course you're upset. So we can be really empathetic with their feelings, even if it's their fault. Like one time my son waited until the very last minute to do a school project and he got a really bad grade on it. And he came home really upset. And it was his fault. It was totally 100% his fault. And it would have been, I was dying to say like, well, that's what happens when you wait until the last minute. And I was dying to pile on. And of course, I still need to say all that, but I'll say it to my husband instead of to him because it's not helpful. It's against relationship. It doesn't make the relationship better. It makes the relationship worse because I've just made him feel worse about a lesson he's already learned. So I can just say, oh, that's really disappointing. You were really hoping for a better grade. Now, but I don't leave it at there because this is a really big idea I haven't yet said. Behavior is communication. It's communication about the skills our kids don't yet have. It's communication. It tells us the things they need more teaching in. So when my kid hit his brother, he basically was saying, his behavior was communicating, I need some skill building in how to manage my anger in more appropriate ways. So when my kid waited until the last minute, he played football with his friends all weekend long instead of working on his project. And he waited till Sunday night at the last minute before this big project was due, right? So I was so mad at him in the moment. But a few days later, I was like, oh, he taught me something. His behavior told me something there. So basically he said, hey, Mom, you know, all those executive function skills of planning ahead, considering what materials I need, thinking about how much time something's going to take me, scheduling time to work on it. I'm 11 years old and I don't have those skills down very well yet. So instead of me doing something to him, like punishment, and saying, next weekend, you're grounded for the whole weekend, you're not seeing any friends next weekend, you only stay home and study all weekend. Instead of doing that punishment for him, instead of doing something to him, I need to do something for him because my job is to teach him to become a self-disciplined person. So when his behavior communicates to me, I don't have skills in this area, then my job as a disciplinarian, a teacher, is to help him build those skills. So what that meant was then the next Friday when he came home, we sat down and said, okay, what is due next week? What day is it due? How much time is it going to take you? And we walked through giving him an experience of learning that lesson and thinking through and planning. And I needed to do it with him every Friday for 2 or 3 months until he was doing it on his own. So I think it's really funny. We get so mad at our kids for doing the same behaviors over and over and over, but we're often not doing anything to help them have another alternative, to do it differently. We're not teaching them a different way. And so it's kind of a little bit of insanity as we keep getting mad about something, but we're not doing anything to change it. So our job as disciplinarians is to teach and build those skills. So I would encourage all of the parents who are listening to think about 2 or 3 areas of your child's behavior that either make you really frustrated, that you really worry about, that end up taking so much time to always keep addressing, and write those 3 things down. Instead of titling those 3 things, the list is not discipline problems. In fact, if you want to, you can even write down discipline problems, but then cross it out. The title of that list is skills my child needs to build. So instead of beating our heads against the wall and keep yelling at our kids, what can we do to teach and build skills so that we don't have to keep dealing with them? It makes it easier for us if we start giving them practice doing it the right way. And I think that is a completely revolutionary way to think about what we do and what discipline is all about.
I totally agree with you. Thank you for all of these explanations. Now, what we said, what we have to do, or what we can do, that's great. That's not so easy, I think, for parents and educators and disciplinarians, like you say. What are the most common challenges parents or educators face when trying to apply the principles of four-brain discipline?
I think our own humanness. I think one of the biggest challenges is we care so much. And this is true about educators just as much as it is about parents. We care so much and we want them to do well. And I think when kids misbehave, I think if we're really reflective, one of the reasons we get so mad and so frustrated with them is because underneath all of that, we're actually afraid. I think, when our children are disrespectful or they're not following the rules or those kinds of things, underneath our anger, we're afraid that it means that they're not going to do well in the world. It means that we're worried that they're not going to be successful or that they're not going to have good relationships. I had a conversation with one of my sons this weekend about a conflict we had this week. And underneath it, I was like, you have to know that that's not how you treat people in relationships, right? That even when you're stressed out, it's not okay to talk to people that way, you know? And I think that underneath, it's like we're so afraid that our child is going to have so hardship when they act this way. So that leads us to being really reactive, and the stakes feel really high. And so I think one of the biggest challenges is our own reactiveness. And when our emotions run high, we get really frustrated or angry or fearful, or we take it personally or something like that. It makes us reactive instead of receptive. And it keeps us from thinking about it as a teaching opportunity. And sometimes when we get really reactive, punishment feels good, right? We want to go into the power and control, mode and say, you can't do that. We want to use threat and power and control and even, like you said, violence. The problem with that is that eventually, unless you're willing to call law enforcement, you will lose. If you say you can't go out and your child says, I'm going out, and you say, no, you can't go out, your child can walk out the door. And unless you're willing to call the police, your child is going to win. So eventually, power and control and force and threats don't work. But our own reactivity sometimes leads us there. So I think for me, that's an easy answer. Is our biggest challenge is our own reactivity, our own emotions. I think this is such an important point too. I want to give everybody listening, and I'm reminding myself, I want to give you permission to not respond right then and there. Right then and there in the moment, I am not my best self because my emotions are taking over. So one of the phrases I use a lot with my kids is one of the ones I use a lot about having them be involved in the discipline is to ask the question, what is your plan? I ask them that all the time. Like, it's time to go to bed and it's already getting late. So what's your plan? Right? I ask that. But the other phrase I use a lot is, I need to go think about how I want to respond to this. So we'll have a conversation in a little while. And I give myself the time and the space to get back to the calm me, the person that is really thoughtful and really wants to do this well. So I think it's human to get reactive and to take things personally. I'll say one other challenge that we have, and that is we think we're the only ones that are responsible in this moment. The truth is that even if you are your child's parent, a lot of what changes their brain and disciplines them is their peers and their teachers and life experiences. So it's not all on you. In fact, lots of times you'll get onto your kid about something and they won't change. Like, here's an example. Lots of times kids, when they're little, they don't like to bathe, right? They fight taking bath and shower. But as soon as one of their friends says, like, you're smelly or your hair's greasy, they start showering every day. So other people will socialize them. Their friends are very powerful socializing force. But the other thing is that we forget that their brains are still developing so much, at least into their mid to late 20s. And so we really can trust development. Even if you don't do or say anything about a particular behavior, as their brain develops, like, kids outgrow hitting typically. They outgrow biting. They outgrow these things as their brain develops. So I think we tend to think everything is so urgent and important. And if I don't deal with it right this second, my child's going to be a terrible sociopath. And I think we can not take things as personally, and we can relax a little bit. We should definitely be addressing behavior, but it's okay to wait. It's okay to get calm. And it's also okay to say, there are lots of other things that are going to make my child self-disciplined besides just me.
Thank you for responding to these challenges and for all the tips you gave us. What changes and improvements can parents expect to see in the relation with their children when they apply these discipline methods?
Well, I think it's really easy to think about it this way. Like I said earlier, the brain is an association machine. So if something feels good, we want more of it. If something feels bad, we want less of it. And so when we start practicing responding to our children in ways where we're connecting with them, even in the discipline moments, they're going to start feeling freer to come to us, even when things go bad, even when they've made a bad decision. We want them to come to us, and we want them to know that they can't lose our love and that we always will be there for them. when we start especially doing connect and redirect, and we're really validating the emotions, even while we're holding a boundary, our children come to feel seen and understood and known and loved for who they are. And I'll tell you that as I coach parents to start making this shift, it feels so much better to them to not be punitive and to think about their job as teachers. So I think parents feel more confident, and then their child's behavior begins to change. And so they feel effective. And then the child is like, this feels good. My parent knows and loves me. And so it makes the relationship better very quickly. The brain is wired, and these connections are formed based on repeated experiences. So one of the things I love to say to parents is, history is not destiny. That however you have been parenting, however you have been disciplining, children's brains are so plastic and changeable that as you begin to start making a shift now, and remember, your brain is changeable too from your repeated experiences, and it's going to take practice to shift and to have this way of being as a disciplinarian become automatic. It takes time for us to practice it, but as we do that and we start, repairing with our children, we start connecting with them emotionally while we're holding the boundaries, we start involving them in the discipline, all of these things that we talked about, children's brains start changing right away. They respond to that, and their brain wiring starts changing right away as well. And so that's really exciting and really hopeful to think about it.
Yeah, thank you very much for these words. History is not destiny. That's very, very important, I think. Thank you very much, Tina, for everything you already said. What are your future plans, or are there any related topics you plan to explore following this work on whole brain discipline?
Yeah. After No Drama Discipline, we wrote a book called The Yes Brain. And then, and that book's about how to create balance, resilience, insight, and empathy in our children, how to build those skills. And then we wrote a book called The Power of Showing Up. And I love that book because it's based on the idea, and it's very much connected to what we've talked about today, that one of the best predictors of how well children turn out on everything they're measured on is that they have what's called secure attachment with their parent. And the way that we cultivate secure attachment is through the 4 S's of helping kids feel safe, helping them feel seen and understood, helping them feel soothed or comforted and cared. That's like the connect thing that we talked about. And then feeling secure in knowing that we will always show up for them, that if they have needs, we're going to see and respond to them. And so that book walks us through the 4 S's. And that's another way to think about, lots of times as a parent, we don't know what to do in the moment, or as an educator, we don't know what to do in the moment. We don't know what the right response is. But if we always, for me, the 4 S's help be my North Star. If we can help the child feel safe and seen and soothed and secure, knowing we're going to keep showing up for them, that changes the brain. It wires the brain. It builds the prefrontal cortex. It creates whole connection in the brain. To me, that's such a key way to even think about how we do discipline. So those are the books that we kind of did. Then I did one on my own called The Bottom Line for Baby, which is alphabetical of the 65 topics that parents get the most competing information about. And there's actually a whole section in there on discipline. They're in the D section, but it's basically laying out like things that are controversial. And it really goes through what are the main conflicting arguments, but what does the science say? And here's the bottom line. And I love that book. That book's for new parents or parents who have a kid up to about age 1. It's the book I most wanted as a new parent, and it still didn't exist, so I wrote it. And then now, and this is back to your main question, I'm currently writing a book with a play therapist that I've worked with for a long time. And the book is about how to play with our children and how to use play interactions with them in ways that build skills, help them process hard things that happen, and build relationships. And that book will be out probably a year from, probably January 25. I have a center in Southern California where I live that is an interdisciplinary clinical practice, really doing this idea of no drama discipline on a clinical level. So for kids who have mental health challenges or developmental challenges, is to be really curious and peel back the layers to find out. I really believe, like what Ross Greene says, children do well when they can. And when they're not doing well, when something's not right, we want to be curious and peel back the layers. So I'm still really investing in my clinic called the Center for Connection. And then I'm trying to post on social media really helpful stuff for parents all over the world.
I encourage every person to follow you on your social media, like Instagram. I just have a last one question for professionals. Could you explain briefly the concept of interpersonal neurobiology and how the latest neuroscience findings can inform the clinical practice of mental health professionals in France?
Yes, that was a mouthful, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So interpersonal neurobiology is a term coined by Dan Siegel, who's my co-author on the books that we've been talking about. And interpersonal neurobiology is a framework or kind of an umbrella term to pull together many fields of science to help us understand the reality of the human brain and our relationships. So it's taking together like neuroscience and psychology and a bunch of other fields, including spirituality, physics, all kinds of things to help us really understand the brain and our relationships and our minds. When we start understanding how the brain and the mind change, particularly in the context of safe relationships, it can really revolutionize how we live our lives, how we think about mental health, which is a huge crisis in our world right now. It revolutionizes how teachers work in the classroom. It revolutionizes how parents interact with their children. It revolutionizes how we think about our jobs and our roles as humans being connected to one another in the world. And it's the idea of integration where different parts of the brain come together as a coordinated whole, where people in relationships who are different individuals come together, linked as a coordinated whole. And then we can do that bigger and bigger, including how we can be connected to each other across the globe, how we really want to honor people's differences and be connected to each other. So even though you and I are a continent and many countries apart, we've had this beautiful conversation with your brilliant mind and all the things that I know and coming together to link to share this with people. And so I really hope that interpersonal neurobiology is something that people look into. Dan Siegel and I have both been on lots and lots of podcasts. Our websites have all kinds of tools, particularly Dan's website has lots for people to learn about interpersonal neurobiology. And it's really a beautiful way to, like I said, honor people's differences and come together as a whole and be linked to each other for what it means to be human and to live meaningfully and to have meaningful relationships that make the world better.
Thank you very much, Tina Payne Bryson, for everything, for this moment and for this conversation.
Thank you so much for having me. And I appreciate everything you're doing to help everyone, including people who are taking care of children, be their best selves. And let's raise a generation of kids who make the world better.
Thank you for listening. We can find each other on social networks like Instagram, TikTok, or Facebook. See you soon.